Welcome back. I'm Ruth Ann, and this is For Those Who Care. Today, I have my friend Isaiah here again. We're doing part two on his experience being a young caregiver. Isaiah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me back.
Well, first of all, just in case people haven't listened to the first episode, you were Lance's caregiver about 6 months before we put him on hospice, and I guess right at the beginning of hospice, and you were just 18 years old. So I would like to know what your relationship with Lance was like at that time.
It was interesting. Um, Lance, at that point in my life, Lance was, I think, the first person who I had met who was truly terminally ill. Um, so it was a much different relationship with him that I had had with anyone prior. And I kind of had to figure out what the nature of that was as it went along. And uh, kind of hand in hand with that is that the relationship with you and him was kind of inextricable. So anything that I had to say to Lance or anything that I had to say to you, it was kind of just presumed that it was said to both people. And, you know, that's not uncommon with relationships, but even more so as providing full-time everyday care for him like you were, it, you know, it's you guys were basically linked at the hip, um, so to speak. So it was interesting. I I can't say for sure um how the relationship was from Lance's side, but I think I got a lot out of it that was unintentional, or at least not I guess intentional maybe is the right word. There was a lot that I learned out of the relationship. I think by happenstance. That was good.
Well, I can say from Lance's perspective, just remembering back, because he's been gone almost 5.5 years now. Um, but he had really severe short-term memory loss, and he couldn't remember people for, well, he couldn't remember anything for more than a few minutes. So anyone who came into his life during the last few years of his life, he generally didn't remember, but he always recognized you. There were a few people that he recognized immediately, and I would put your name up on the whiteboard saying that you were going to be there that day, and he would remember that it was you. So that to me spoke volumes, because if he remembered somebody, that meant that they were really important to him.
Like that.
Are there any particular conversations or moments with him that you still carry with you today?
I remember you and him, I was over there maybe not late in the evening, but a little bit later than I normally was, and you had pulled out a radio and some CDs with songs Lance just, that Lance remembered and recognized and loved on it, like songs that you guys used to listen to together. And you had put some, it was when we were cleaning out the storage room, and we had found some CDs in there. And we put them in, and as someone who like music plays a big part of or a big role in my life, getting to see him kind of it was so weird. It was like this snap, like this immediate recognition of like, oh yeah, this isn't a deep part of my brain that is you know a core memory for me, and watching that get pulled out of him by the music being played. It was really interesting. It kind of took my perspective on, you know, music's relationship to memory loss from kind of an assumption of pseudoscience to something that I had like seen it like in vivo. Um, very, very cool. And I've thought about that later on with, you know, uh, God forbid if my mom or something uh, ends up developing dementia or someone I love, I'm like taking note now of like what what songs could I use in that event to maintain that connection with these people. Kind of a morbid thought to have just on the on the regular, but I think I just think about those things relatively frequently.
I don't think that's morbid at all, but look at the life that I lived. Lance was sick for 25 years. So I just consider it all preparation for life, right?
Yeah, you're hedging your bets.
Oh my goodness. And yes, music did that to him. That was one of the most incredible things. I've journaled so many times that music made him come alive like nothing else did. And there was a time that you and your family all came over and your aunt played the guitar and everyone was singing with Lance, and it was songs that he was familiar with, and that was such a special time. I love that memory.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that in a while, but that was a really special opportunity to like be there for that. We did a couple of things with my family and you guys together, but I think that one was truly special.
Well, if you could tell Lance one thing today about the role he played in your life, what would that be?
That's interesting. Like there would be a lot that I would want to say. Honestly, looking back at like where I was when I knew Lance versus where I am now, I think I think I would tell him like I never did and never will regret any of the time that I spent around him. Um, and really truly like there aren't any moments where I would have wanted to be doing something different looking back. Like I would never want to take away what I learned and experienced from that relationship and what I learned as a person from interacting with Lance. And I would want him to know that because I would be afraid that he would assume that, an 18-year-old spending his time around someone who, you know, with severe memory loss and someone who required 24/7 caregiving, that maybe the assumption is like go out and be a teenager. But it could not be more the opposite.
I love that. Well, in conversations that you and I have had,
Mm.
you've described that as being a heavy atmosphere. And you just mentioned the cognitive decline. Lance also had cancer and
Yeah.
he was living with a terminal illness. What was that like for someone 18 years old experiencing that?
Weird. In a single word answer, weird. Um, I feel like there are a lot of 18-year-olds out there, obviously, that deal with, maybe parents or other family members who have terminal illnesses or even chronic illnesses that, they're dealing with day to day. Um, but it was a very, I don't want to use the word somber because it wasn't a somber atmosphere. It was actually pretty, I think, celebratory a lot of times. Like every small win that Lance had was, cause for celebration. But there was always this undertone of we're celebrating the small wins because the norm is so hard. And watching someone fight every day for those small wins, both you and him, I think it made me take it very seriously. And like it was no, no BS for me. Like you know, we did fun stuff, outings with Lance and everything, but I felt a sense of gravitas about it. Like I'm truly here affecting someone's life who is very vulnerable. And I think if I had to, in many words, and not just weird, describing the heavy atmosphere, I think it was that I was starting to recognize the reality of you guys' life and realizing that, you know, you don't get to go home from work from it. Um, so that I think that kind of sums up the heaviness of the atmosphere is this is important. This is not a job. This is something I'm doing that is affecting someone else.
Well, were there any specific moments that made that very real to you, that he was dying and that we were living the way that we were living? Like you said, we tried to have joy in our life.
I think I think it was when he went on hospice. I think was the moment that it really clicked. Like that this is no longer a waiting game. This is a now. Um, and this is soon. Um, I think you've described on the podcast several times one of the last um, VA visits that he had, where he just was tired and was just, I'm done. Like, I've been pushing for so long. And I remember hearing you talk about that and kind of spiraling in my own head, like, how is it possible for this to be real? Like, I I feel like with someone who has a terminal illness, you always know that they're going to die, but you never really think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like it's something that happens to other people, but not you.
Yep.
And I think that's when he went on hospice, I think that was the big changing moment for me, realizing like, oh, this is for real.
Yeah. I've got a picture of Lance from probably about a month and a half after he went on hospice, and he doesn't
Hmm.
look sick. So if you just saw Lance in a picture, you wouldn't think that he was sick. But when you spend time with him, you heard the slurred speech, and you could see that there was cognitive decline, and he didn't move quickly. And so really spending time with him, you could see it, but looking at it in pictures, if you just walked in the door even and said hi to him, he didn't look sick.
Yeah, it wasn't a very outwardly overt illness. Like I feel like a lot of it, you've spoken about the person that Lance was, you know, even every year or every month going back, like how, you know, parts of him were the same and parts of him were just completely different from the person that you met, especially the person you first met. And, I feel like you of all people saw looking back at least, can see like how much he changed over the years. Um, but like you said, there are pictures of him from 5, 10 years before I met him. And he had plenty of like facial aspects that had shifted, like maybe being a little bit puffier or you know, different skin tone. But overall, like he kind of just looked like Lance. Um, so yeah, I think it was spending time around him kind of put that. into reality, at least for me.
We talked a little bit about this last time, but I'm wondering if you want to expand on it a little bit. You've mentioned that working with Lance at that time in your life gave you a little bit of stability. What kind of stability did it offer?
I mean, routine. Like I think that was the big thing is kind of it's kind of backwards because I think I talked last time about it being, unpredictable every time I come over. Like there's something new waiting. Um, and I never knew what we'd be doing each day. But I always knew that like, okay, I have this time blocked out. I'm going to get into like Lance and Rathan mode, and I'm going to be in that mode. Um, the one thing that the one thing stability wise that I did like I hated was weirdly getting paid for it. Like I was definitely like I needed the money just as like a person working a job. Like that was, you know, my income. Uh, but it always felt so weird being paid by I would be like, this is a person with a sick husband. I can't take the money from you. But under obviously understanding from your perspective, like you're hiring someone as an employee, like you're gonna pay them, but it was still very awkward for me.
Oh, that's interesting because I know how hard caregiving is. I did it for so many years. Lance was sick for 25 years, and I was his full time caregiver for the last 12 years of that. And it's a really hard job. And it's often the lowest paid job in the medical profession. Even if you're not doing medical stuff, caregiving is still, it still falls under that category. And I don't think people get paid enough for what they do because it is a really hard job. And it was so appreciated. You did an amazing job and you earned every cent.
I agree with you on people needing to be paid more. Like you're doing the Lord's work, taking care of people.
Looking back now in your mid 20s, in what ways did caregiving accelerate your own growing up?
Part of me wants to say like if you're doing that at that age, how could it not? How could reckoning with mortality, weird experience and had some like weird stuff going on at home, very turbulent home life, and then uh mortality facing work life. I think it was kind of out of necessity, learning to kind of pull my pants up and you know uh, do the hard things, especially watching you, like you and the other caregivers that were around. Like you got to do the hard things, and that was very apparent and very tangible um, when around Lance and you. So that I think was a big push towards holding myself more accountable and trying to stay more responsible.
So, for people who are listening, what kinds of hard things are you talking about when you were watching me or another caregiver doing things for Lance?
I mean, man, you had to every meal you would have food for Lance, and then you would have to make sure that he didn't choke while he was eating. And I'm just thinking about, okay, there's 365 days in a year. You're eating 3 meals a day, sometimes more with snacks and everything. How many thousands of times are you sitting there like paying attention to someone to like you're trying to eat your own damn lunch and at the same time you're making sure that this person who relies on you is not going to have an accident that like either ends in an emergency or death. Like that that kind of gravity involved with lunchtime is kind of a microcosm of how intense life was. And so, watching that being like, oh, okay, I can actually do the dishes when I get home. Like it's not that big of a deal. It's actually like not that big of a deal. I think that helped with perspective a lot.
Oh my gosh. I just can't everybody be more like Isaiah? Can you just like
Dude,
pay attention to what's going on here and like really see?
that's I think I spent a lot of time at your place just like watching how you interacted with Lance and how Lance interacted with you and the world and you with your other employees and just like absorbing information visually like that. Being like, oh, Ruth Ann can't eat yet because Lance is eating and she has to be like locked in.
Oh my gosh. I still stand at the counter to eat because
Yep.
I'll be standing there and I'll have like a few bites in and I'm like, you can go sit down, Ruth Ann. You can
Yeah,
go.
you can go enjoy a meal.
Well, if you think about Isaiah before Lance, before working for Lance, and Isaiah after working for Lance, what feels different about who you are?
I mean, snap everything. Kind of the same answer given about the heavy atmosphere being weird. This answer is just everything. No, um, I think out of anything that I can identify from that period of my life that kind of broke me out of my shell, and helped me kind of break free of a lot of social anxiety, I think that was huge. Um, Working with you guys. Like I had worked public facing jobs before that, and weirdly, it was the least public facing job I've ever worked, that helped the most get me out of my shell. And it was kind of, I had to. I think I mentioned last episode, you know, you were very blunt. Well, not were, are. You're a very blunt person, a very forward person, and I love it about you because that forced me to not beat around the bush with things. Just go, yeah, Ruth Ann, I'm tired. I'm going to take a break right now. Rather than going, no, no, it's fine. I'm totally fine. Like, no, Ruth Ann's going to tell me when she's like, when she needs a break for a minute. I'm going to tell her, and we're just going to be completely straightforward with each other and blunt. And I think that opened me up a lot to, like, oh, I can interact honestly with people, in the rest of my life. That was a big change.
So my bluntness was a good thing in this instance.
In this instance, the bluntness was a good thing.
That's good because I don't hear that very often.
Was it always fun? Maybe not always fun, but it was, I think, helpful.
I always knew where I stood.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
What did you learn about your own capacity for empathy, patience, or emotional intelligence in that role as Lance's caregiver?
I think patience, it's kind of beating a dead horse at this point. But just talking about like how much time you spend every day, just looking after Lance. I think in the same way that that pushed me towards responsibility and accountability with myself, I think it also instilled a lot of patience, because it wasn't easy, uh, to take care of Lance, like especially with his memory loss. Like I could tell when you would get frustrated, like having to explain the same thing 17 times in an hour, and just the centering of yourself and maintaining grace in handling that. And who knows, maybe that was just with people over. I don't know what goes on outside of that. but it certainly taught me a lot about the I think capacity for patience. It's like having a kid when you have a young kid, you can get upset with them because you've like corrected them on something before, but it's like how many times can I get upset about correcting you on this? You're like a child. And the same thing with someone who has like cognitive decline or especially with memory loss. Like I can't get mad about repeating these things because you don't remember that I've repeated them. This is the first time I've told you this. Um, so I think patience was a very big lesson there. Um, and like, yeah, you can you can handle this. You are capable.
Took me a long time to learn that patience with him because that memory loss started hmm, probably about 10 years or so before he died. It wasn't as bad. But those last few years, yeah, you're right. I mean, there were times when he asked me the same question 30 times in one day. Did caring for Lance change how you think about illness, disability, or aging in general? And if so, how?
I think so. Um, illness is not what you see on Grey's Anatomy. Sometimes maybe it is. But it's unique to each person. So is I think you said aging and disability, like those are all case by case basis. Um, I think it's really easy to lump people into categories of saying like, oh, this person has lung cancer. It's going to look like this, and their experience is going to be like this. Um, but it really, really is like completely different for each person. I have a lot of respect for healthcare providers like nurses, doctors, and caregivers who do this day in and day out, and they've gotta um, be flexible with every single person and be purge the assumptions from their mind about who this person is and what they're going through. So I think I look at it through a different lens now than I did before, certainly.
Well, you mentioned a little bit about me already, how you saw me, but I'm curious from your outside perspective, especially from as as such a young person, what did you see in me during that season as a wife, as a caregiver, and as someone just trying to hold everything together?
I think I saw like a nuclear detonation encased in like lead. It was this lead outer shell with bombs going off on the inside at all times. Um, I think the second I saw how many like lists and reminders and alarms and etc. that you had every single day, I was like, this person's brain is not in their head, it's on the counter. And it is amongst these documents. Um, very, very unique thing to watch. Um, I think I think you did a great job with the I think you did a great job with the outward the outward appearance of holding things together, or at least somewhat succeeding at holding them together.
I think I was pretty much holding things together. I don't know how I did it, but I did it.
Yeah.
It's just something that I would wake up every day and I would think, well, I've got to do this. So I'm just gonna do it, do
What
it
option do you have?
and set it up in a way that works for me so that I could be successful at it. Were there things that you noticed about me, about my stress level, my coping, or ways I tried to create normalcy in our life that maybe I didn't, or maybe that I wasn't aware of at that time?
Maybe not that you weren't aware of at that time. Um, but one thing that kind of stuck out, and seems to have improved vastly now is how stressful driving was. Like, it was a necessity because you couldn't exactly take an Uber with Lance. Um, so it was absolutely a necessity for like VA appointments or, you know, any other things that you needed for daily life. But I remember that just being like this Herculean task of like, all right, I have to center myself. I'm gonna take some like anti-anxiety meds and I'm going to get myself ready to do this. And as a teenager, you're like, what? You're just driving. Looking back now, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see why that was a why that was a pretty huge undertaking.
Well, and to be clear, I wasn't taking anti-anxiety meds. I was taking ashwagandha, which helped with
I
anxiety.
should have said supplements, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, supplements. I don't take medications before I drive. Um,
No.
but
Operating heavy machinery and all that.
so what did you see then? What do you see now that you didn't see then about the driving? Like, why was that such a big deal?
I mean, I see now that you can get on an airplane and not like completely feel like your world is going to explode. Um, like I could definitely sense how stressful it was driving anywhere for you. Um, and I think now, like, you just go places. Like, you're like, yeah, went on a hike that I had to drive to, and you go, okay, cool. Ruth Ann's like,
Almost
it doesn't even phase you. Yeah, it doesn't even phase you now. Um, but that was definitely something where it's like, okay, now that I am not having to worry about keeping another human like safe and um like held together every time that I drive, I can just get in and go a place. It's not this massive task anymore.
I'll tell you what, and this is something that I hadn't really thought about with the driving was I don't know if you remember, but I had everything set up for Lance so that he could reach everything from where he sat.
Yep.
And I had to be very intentional about that because before I had it set up that way, he would unbuckle his seatbelt and try to lean into the back seat to get something that he needed and hit me in the head. And like, I'm driving down the freeway. It just wasn't safe. So I had the pockets in the backs of the seats because we had a van. I had the pockets in the backs of the seats. I had a trash can right behind the console. I had everything around his seat that he could possibly need if he needed Kleenexes or wipes to wipe his hand. I had a little tray for him, a non-slip tray that he could set on his lap in case he was having something to eat or something like that and didn't want it to fall. I mean, it was a crazy amount of things that I had to consider just getting him in the car to go somewhere and making sure that he had everything that he needed. It was very stressful.
I did. I can't even imagine. I was going to I actually avoided using the word because I was like, oh, maybe that's, not a great word to use. But I was going to say like keeping him contained in the car. Like it sounds bad to say, but I remember even at home, it was this constant struggle of like, Lance, I know you want to like get up and go walk yourself around and go do things for yourself, but it is not safe for you to do that. And because of that, I need to make sure that I know where you are and I know what you're doing so that you don't inadvertently hurt yourself. And just like the constant mental overhead of where's Lance? Okay. Is he Is he trying to like get up, walk around? Is he, trying to reach for something? Does he need something? Is he going to try and, get something for himself? And exactly what you were talking about with the car. Like, is he going to unbuckle and try and reach in the back seat? Like, balancing the respecting someone's autonomy and making sure that they don't hurt themselves. Like, I can't even imagine what that's like.
And the need for having somebody there with us at all times too, because
Yes.
when we went somewhere, I couldn't just leave him alone for a few minutes. I mean, there were times that I would stop at the gas station. It was just the two of us. I would stop at the gas station and have to run inside for something. Maybe I forgot to bring him some Gatorade or something like that. So I'd run in to get that. And I was always worried that while I was gone, he would try to get out of the car, even if I was only gone for 2 minutes. It was just, he was so quick about things. So the necessity of having somebody there with us at all times during those last few years of his life was, I think it's something that people just don't understand until they've experienced it. And most people didn't really see that. So,
Yeah, that was something that always stood out to me, is just the need for constant supervision just to keep him safe.
well, looking at me now, years later, like I said, it's been almost 5.5 years since he's been gone. What changes stand out to you?
The rate at which you're able to talk and like pull words out of your brain, just doing this podcast. I imagine Ruth Ann mid caregiving trying to do this podcast and conjuring up words. Like it was like every fifth word, it was like, brain is fried. What was the word I was looking for there? Like the fact that you're able to talk for an hour straight, like that is a different Ruth Ann than I knew. For sure.
Wow. Well, I didn't really have a lot of conversations because Lance had dementia,
Yeah.
and 95% of my time was spent with him. And when caregivers were there, my conversations were about caregiving generally. I didn't talk about a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So by the time he died, I didn't really have a lot to talk about. And I couldn't remember how to have a conversation.
You go, well, what the hell else is there in my life? Like, I can actually go like do things. No, I think it's been cool to watch you like reach into those parts of your brain now. I think after obviously after spending a long time in the grieving process and the healing process and everything, watching you kind of come into your own and uh, kind of rediscover those parts of you that are Ruth Ann and not Ruth Ann in parentheses caregiver,
Yeah.
um, or Ruth Ann in parentheses Lance's wife.
Yeah.
That's been interesting.
It's been interesting for me too. Um, it's actually been so cool. I was a caregiver for so many years that I couldn't remember my life before being a caregiver. And I had my girlfriends and I, a couple of girlfriends and I set up a girls' night out, and we're getting all glammed up for it. And I haven't done that in a long time. So I had to go out and get an outfit for it. And while I was shopping, I remembered that Lance and I used to do that in our early years. We used to get dressed up all the time and go out for really nice dinners and sometimes to a show or whatever. But I had completely forgotten about that. So it's really cool to rediscover, but also remember those parts of my life that I had forgotten.
Yeah, you're a whole different person now than, I feel like you're like speed running your evolution as a person. Like you had this huge stint of your life where you're like, okay, I'm gonna put myself on pause. And now that you're out of that, you're like, all right, I'm gonna do everything now.
Yeah, that's exactly what it did. I want to live the rest of my life because there were
Oh
so
yeah.
many things. I mean, we lived while Lance was alive too, but we had a lot of limitations. And now I'm like, I don't have limitations. I want to do whatever I can.
I'm gonna go to Australia and Ireland and wherever the hell I want.
Yes, yes, and experience life and meet people. Oh my gosh, it's so fun. How has watching my progression after Lance's death influenced the way you think about grief, resilience, and life after loss?
Now is kind of a good time to ask that question. Um, just because I think you've done a lot of healing post Lance's death. And, we have phone calls, regularly where we just catch up and getting to watch the changes in how you view the world and your environment that you create around you and what boundaries you do and don't have and uh, who you are as a person. It's interesting to see you come out on the other side of that. Obviously, the grief is always with you, and the loss is always with you, and part of yourself will always be acknowledging it. But death of a loved one feels like such an insurmountable grief. Like you hear about someone who loses their husband, or you hear about someone who is widowed, and you go like, oh, they must be forever in this like miasma of grief. And seeing the reality of someone being able to go through that and grieve properly and grieve fully and uh, like really allow those emotions to mature and like catalyze inside of themselves. It's really cool to see the other side of that and know that there is life after grief. Um, it gives me a lot of hope for, you know, you look at your own parents and loved ones and you go, yeah, I'm gonna have to deal with you dying someday. But to see that, okay, there is life after grief, that's a very encouraging thing for me.
I love hearing your perspective on that, especially because you were so young
Mm.
when you worked for us. And the reason that I wanted to ask those questions is because I want to offer hope to people who might be going through that long-term caregiving of someone who is terminally ill, or maybe someone who just lost a loved one, that there is hope for life after grief. There really is.
That makes me want to ask you a question, actually, asking the interviewer a question. Um, no, do you think in the especially the closing years where you saw that, Lance's illness was kind of coming to a head and especially post hospice, were you afraid of the grief before it even sunk in? Or do you think you had already begun grieving before Lance's death?
Oh, I was grieving for years before he died. I had anticipatory grief for so many years, but I also grieved the losses all along the way because it was constantly loss after loss after loss with him. And I was terrified of what grief was going to feel like after he died because it was so hard while he was alive. And I journaled about that while he was on hospice. If it's this bad now, what's it going to be like when he's really gone?
How
And
am I gonna live?
yes, how am I going to survive this? And I really wasn't sure if I would survive it. And I've talked about that in other episodes, that I didn't know if I would survive and I didn't really care. I mean, we never had children. It was just the two of us, and he was my whole world. So I wasn't like a lot of my friends who have lost their loved ones, where they had children, grandchildren, other families surrounding them. They had a job, they had another purpose. This was my entire purpose, Lance. And I really wasn't sure where to go from there. Um, and my grief lasted for a long time. The shock of my grief, I've heard people, I think about 1 to 2 years of shock is pretty average. Mine lasted almost 4 years.
Yeah.
It was every year I would think, okay, I'm better. The shock is gone. And then I'd look back a year later and go, wow, I still was in a little bit of shock because I feel better now. And then look back again a year later and find, oh, I still was in shock. And finally, after the fourth year, looking back and realizing that I still was dealing with some shock then, when I look back at the fifth year mark, I didn't feel like I had been in shock at all that previous year. So it took me about 4 years, I would say.
Wow. So you did kind of anticipate the, maybe not anticipate, but you did fear the grief, and then it was was it different than what you expected, or like how different was it than you expected, the grief and healing process post Lance's death? Like, obviously you had a lot of time to think about it and to, conjure up what you expect it to be like. Like, how different was it?
Hmm. Well, oh, that's a tough one. So Lance died during COVID. He died
Mm.
about 5 months after the initial lockdown. And so it was a very strange time for the entire world. And I was completely alone. I had friends who weren't afraid to come and spend time with me, that we would spend maybe an hour or two together. But the majority of the time, I was alone. And it was hard. It was really hard. Um, I decided about 2 months after he died that I knew I couldn't live in that house anymore because the grief was so heavy for me. He had we had moved into that home and we had it built. We moved into it, and within a few months of moving into it, he was in appointments trying to figure out what was going on. He was having a lot of issues and ended up retiring um, about a year and a half later from work. And that whole house was about him being sick. So every time I opened my eyes, every time I turned a corner, I saw something that reminded me of him being sick. 15 years of watching him decline and then die. So I started packing up my house thinking it's going to take me a year and a half to get rid of all these things because, COVID, nobody wants to take any donations either. I didn't know what to do with all the stuff we had. We had so much stuff. So I just started packing things up. I started making piles everywhere. Like, these are to throw away. These are to give away. These are, this I need to keep. And 6 months after I started packing, I was gone. I couldn't live there anymore. And I moved out. I moved halfway across the country and I moved out to the middle of nowhere. I was living on a 160-acre farm that had a gate, a locked gate. So the only people that had a key to the gate were the people who had their animals on another side of the property. And so I was out there all alone for 6 months. And just really, I didn't see anyone but maybe once every 2 weeks. And I just really spent that time immersing myself in whatever I was feeling. I just went with it. I'd get up in the morning,
Yep.
and if I didn't feel like doing anything, if I felt like just laying in bed and crying, that's what I did. If I felt like just sleeping, that's what I did. If I felt like going and sitting out in the humidity, because I hadn't lived in humidity for so long, but I'd go and sit on the front porch in that just, 90 degrees and 100% humidity and just sit there and soak it in and just feel alive. Some days I danced, it was like it just every single day was different, but I just immersed myself in whatever I was feeling. And I've pretty much done that the entire time. So it's been really interesting. Not,
Huh.
I don't think it's typical what most people do. And I was fortunate that I was able to take a full 2 years, because I've said before in other episodes too that by the time Lance died, I hadn't had a day off in 7 years. If you add up just the weekends in 7 years, that adds up to 2 full years. Um, and so I said before he even died, I said, when Lance dies, I am taking 2 full years off. I'm not going to attempt to get a job. I'm not going to, when I wanted to go back to school, which I did, but I waited until a little more than 2 years after he died. But I took that full 2 years to really give myself the time and the space to heal. And it was necessary after him being sick for 25 years and me being his full-time caregiver for more than 12. That was absolutely necessary. And 2 years wasn't even enough time because, like I said, it took up until about the 5 year mark that I really started feeling like, and it was a little bit before 5 years, but it took me almost that much time to really feel like, okay, I can do normal things again. And I'm still getting there.
That's that's so interesting. Like it's you said to yourself, it's an uh, abnormal grieving experience, partially because you were so untied to things that would have kept you where you were in Idaho. Um, you were able to just uproot and go. Um, and it's interesting to hear how that shaped your grieving experience and how that shaped your healing. And honestly, to hear that there were these moments of maybe it was joy, maybe it was mania coming out of it, healing, uh, having those moments that you remember of like, okay, I had good days in the bad days. Maybe they were very infrequent, but there were moments where it's like trying to start a car in the winter, where it's like you're turning the key and engine's trying to turn over. And I feel like for lack of a better term, your engine has turned over at this point.
I love that.
It's it's finally run in.
Uh, oh
It was
my God.
fantastic.
Wow. That's been quite a journey. It really has. And I couldn't have done it without all the people who have supported me along the way. I mean, just having these the conversations that you and I have every few months, we have a scheduled phone call. And I do that with several people. And that's been such an important part of my healing because it's something so normal. It
Yeah.
The thing that really strikes me now is every time I get out to do something that is normal, I just feel the immensity of that situation. I just feel how big it is. How I remember being out with one of my girlfriends a few months ago, and we went shopping for clothes and we went and got some makeup and stuff. And I looked at her and I just felt like crying. And I said, this just feels so normal. And because when you don't deal with things like that, when you don't deal with long-term caregiving, and being so isolated and so restricted, you take those everyday things for granted. And I feel it when I go into a restaurant by myself. I remember right after Lance died, I was waiting for the coroner to arrive, and I went and stood at the front door. And we had this big glass security door that I had installed a few years earlier because I was always afraid that if I was out of the house or out of the room for a minute, that he could get up and he could leave anytime. So I got these security doors installed that he couldn't figure out how to use the locks. And I walked over to the front door and I was standing there waiting. And I remember looking out and just feeling this sense of calm, realizing that I didn't have to protect Lance anymore. It was the it was such a powerful feeling. I feel it right now, just remembering that. Just just the enormous amount of responsibility that I had in caring for him, and all of a sudden I didn't have that responsibility anymore. And I think I don't even think one of the hardest things for me moving forward has been learning how to take care of myself, because I was always so good at taking care of Lance. It's so much easier to take care of other people. I think you find that with most people when you talk to them. We're just conditioned to take care of other people. I've really struggled figuring out how to take care of myself. I'm doing better now, but anyway.
Wow. I remember that security door. I remember every time I would show up for work, he'd say, "Wait outside, I will open the door for you."
I've got just a few more questions left. I want to go back to Lance a little bit, and just talk about like some of the meaning behind that. When you think about Lance's legacy in your life, what words or images come to mind first?
That one's honestly easy. Um, I think was it Lance's 50th birthday party we did? There's a picture of the giant Adirondack chair in the back with Lance in it, and I'm on the arm leaning in with him, and that image comes up on, I think it's my Facebook or something, but it comes up from time to time as like a one of the memory things. And that is the if I had to make a like a scrapbook of the memories that I have of the experience with Lance, like that would be on the front of it because I think it puts everything in such a nice, it was the culmination of the experiences that I had with both of you was getting to do something like that for him and getting to help with the like setting up and getting ready for this his big 50, like, and it was just such a special moment seeing you know all of this work that you put into planning it and other people who helped planning or plan it while you are so busy taking care of him, making time to make it special. Like that really is one of my favorite pictures because I think it really just sells like the care that was put into Lance from the people around him and the appreciation that I know he had for how much work it took.
Wow. I was just talking to somebody. I was just talking to my baby brother about that party recently. We were reminiscing about that because a bunch of my family members came out for that 50th birthday
Yeah.
party because we had already decided we were going to put him on hospice. He wanted to make it to 50 first. So we waited till his
Yeah.
50th birthday and then we put him on hospice. But the thing that I love so much about that party was he had short-term memory loss that was so bad he couldn't remember for more than a couple of minutes. And so I always asked him what he wanted to try and make sure that I got him the right things because I didn't want to get him something and have him be disappointed in it. So the last few years of his life, I always asked him, "Is this something that you'd want?" And then I buy him a present. He'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this is the best present
How'd
ever."
you know?
But you picked it out. Anyway, I took him shopping to get the decorations for his 50th birthday party. Do you remember that?
Yep. And the big Lance balloons over the chair.
Yes, but we were walking around the party store getting everything and he kept forgetting why we were there and I had to keep telling him we're buying we're buying decorations for your surprise birthday party. There are all these people coming out for your 50th birthday party. And he's like, "Why are you telling me this?" I'm like, "You have short-term memory loss. You're not going to remember in a few minutes." And then he'd go, "Oh, okay." And then he'd pick out some more decorations and I'd push him to another area and he'd go, "Why are we here again?" And I would do the same thing. And then when it came time for the party, I pulled him out into the backyard in his wheelchair and I'm backing up and as I turned around there's this whole line of people surprised and he was so surprised and then I pushed him around the backyard and he just commented on how amazing those decorations were and he loved them so much. Such good memories. I love it. For anyone who's dealing with memory loss, if you want to have some fun, I mean, that might sound kind of mean, but it brought so much joy to him. And it brought so much joy to me watching him enjoy the things that he had already picked out, thinking I picked it out for him.
When you've mentioned before that like even with the memory loss, even if he didn't remember what had happened that day, he would remember how he felt during the day. And
Yes.
I can't even imagine like after all of that, just being like, I don't remember why I had a great day today, but it was awesome.
I know. Yes. And that's just how it was that night after
Yep.
that party. He had the best time because the next day, like I said, a bunch of my family members were there. And the next day, they showed up to say goodbye to him. And he's like, hey, what are you guys doing here? He couldn't even remember that they'd been there the day
Yep.
before.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness. Well, how did your experience with Lance shape what you want your own life and legacy to look like?
I hope that I get taken care of like that if I'm, ever in that spot. Um, no, I feel enabled after watching um Lance and being around him. I feel so capable to take care of someone now. Like obviously I didn't do all of the ins and outs. There was a ton of aspects of caregiving that I never experienced. Um, just because I especially like the medical parts of it. But I feel capable of doing that. Um, and I think it's really empowering to not fear illness in the people you love because you know you'll be able to take care of them and give them a quality of life that they deserve. Um, and that removes a lot of the fear around aging and illness. Like I know I'll still be able to, you know, provide my loved ones with a pretty good quality of life. I have confidence in myself. And that comes from watching that happen with Lance and being a part of it.
Yeah. I have confidence that you would do an amazing job, Isaiah. Hopefully you don't have to,
Perfect.
but
I hope so.
it is a really hard job, but it is I wouldn't trade that time for anything. It's shaped me into who I am and it truly made me a better person and I see that it's made the people who were a significant part of his life, especially during those last few years, I can see how it shaped them too, you
Yeah.
included. Is there anything that you've never said out loud about that time to yourself, your family, to me, that maybe you would like to give voice to now?
I think if I want to say anything in closing, it's what I said in the last episode. If you have the opportunity to do this, to be a caregiver for someone in any capacity, even if it's just even if it's working at something like a nursing home, volunteering there and uh, playing music or cooking food or just spending time with people, do it for you because the gratitude and the humility that that gives to you is irreplaceable. Um, and I think just doubling down saying if you have the opportunity, take it. You will not regret. It might be hard, but you won't regret it. That's the maybe nothing that I have never said out loud before, but I think that is the most important thing that I can say.
Mm, it's a great takeaway. And I think we'll just leave it there. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to do this. Thank you for just sharing from your heart. This has been one of the favorite conversations that I've had. Um, you have such a unique perspective, and I love you so much. I appreciate you so much. And
Love you too, Ruth Ann. Do
I'm
the heart thing. Thank you for having me on and letting me share that experience. It's not something that comes up in conversation a ton, with other people, in their 20s. So it's it's been interesting to give voice to that.
Well, thank you everyone for listening, and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you're notified when the next episode is available. I'll see you next time.